everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Mystical Munchies, featuring the official World of Warcraft cookbook. This week we're cooking up the dessert, which is also the last recipe, Dalaran Brownie. The crunchy spider surprise was actually pretty good last week, if a touch on the spicy side. But the spices, that's actually one of the few times where spiciness is actually welcome, because that was otherwise going to turn out to be a pretty bland recipe. But as usual, let's go ahead and tell the story for this week's recipe. Make sure you're seated while you enjoy this delicious baked good. It will take all your concentration to navigate each gooey, decadent bite. Oozing with a chocolate glaze and dusted with cocoa and spice, these are the brownies to beat all brownies. But don't set a bad example. Bring enough to share. Well, anytime they say that these are the such and such to beat all such and such, I get a little bit nervous about that, but we are going to give these a try. The ingredients are waiting for us at the table, so let's head in that general direction. It might be a little bit hard to see, but I am trying to go for a three-part division here because there's three distinct parts to this recipe. So first up, so for the brownies themselves, we're going to need half a cup of butter, which the laser pointer is right there. It's just in shot. A third of a cup of unsweetened baking cocoa. I'm using cocoa powder, which I'll also need for a later step in the recipe. 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar. 2 eggs. A teaspoon of vanilla, which is hiding back there. A half a cup of all-purpose flour. And a 1/4 teaspoon each of baking powder and salt. For the glaze, we're going to need 3 tablespoons of butter. Another 1/3 of a cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. 2 tablespoons of milk. And a cup of confectioners sugar, which I think, yeah, the laser pointer should be catching that. Maybe a little bit of a glare from the light, but the light came with the apartment, nothing I can do about that. Then for dusting, we're going to need a tablespoon each of ground cinnamon and back to cocoa powder again. With that, let's head into the kitchen and start putting the recipe together. I've got the oven preheating to 350 right now, and I'm going to grease a 9x9 pan. I'm doing the greasing off shot, and I'm also going to put a layer of parchment paper down so it'll be easier to lift the brownies out when they're ready. And of course, this box is going to be a stubborn so-and-so, but we got it all handled there. And in the midst of trying to prepare the parchment paper, the oven just came to temperature. So now I'm going to get the pan, which the parchment paper is not wanting to stay in, out of shot. That's probably the best I'm going to do with it. But what we want to do now is we actually are going to melt the butter in a medium saucepan. That thing is not cooperating. Hopefully it'll behave a lot better when I actually get the brownies in there. I'm not betting on that. Recipe as written, you're actually supposed to melt the butter and the baking cocoa together, but since I'm using cocoa powder, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to melt the butter over probably medium heat. Then I'm going to add the cocoa powder to it. So let me make sure we get the right recipe. We're going at about a 5 on the oven. We are going to watch the butter melt in real time. Plus I'm going to see if I can get this parchment paper to stay a bit better. Okay, that seems like it's holding a bit better now. And I'm actually going to put something... I'm actually putting another saucepan that I'm going to need later in the recipe in there, just to try to help hold that parchment paper down. I'm going to bring the cocoa powder into shot, so I'm ready for that. Because like I said, the plan here is going to be melt the butter, and then I'm going to add the cocoa powder to it. All right, I will start bringing in more of my ingredients. This is always a boring part of Mystical Munchies, watching something melt, but I think by doing these preparation steps in real time, I think it's helping me make sure everything goes over very smoothly. So that's a conscious decision I've made, where if you remember the very first time we made the no-bake cookies, I got in trouble by trying to get cute. So Mystical Munchies is going to try to come with as little cuteness as possible in terms of camera techniques. I'm trying to get cute with it and turning the camera on when something's happening, especially when I need it to happen basically like that in real time. So we're just going to try to watch everything as much as possible happen in real time. The butter seems to be melting pretty well here. I could probably jack the heat up if I wanted to, but I really don't right now. Okay, we'll just move the butter around a little bit. Just to try to kind of help facilitate the meltage a little bit. Go grab my drink since my throat's getting a little bit dry. Sugar. All right, the butter is just about melted, so I'll be ready to. I'm getting ready to take that off the heat the moment that's melted. Those can go there as they're in a container. I'm also bringing the 9x9 pan with the parchment, that's greased and with the parchment paper on it and close, because I'm going to need that pretty soon. Alright, the butter. I'm going to wait for these last few chunks of butter to finish melting before I take it off the heat, but we are just about ready to bring the butter off the heat. Technically I'm using margarine, but I basically call margarine butter, so just so you're not confused on that. Actually, I can probably kill this and get it off the heat now, so I think I will. We'll move over to the counter with that off the heat. Now we're going to add in the 1/3 of a cup of cocoa powder. Right, 1/3 of a cup up here? Yes. We'll combine it that way. Okay. Then we'll bring that back over toward the table because we will need that at a later step. And we'll stir that to combine it together. Okay, now we want to add in the sugar, eggs, and vanilla until we have a smooth mixture. So 3/4 of a cup of sugar. That can go back up. 2 eggs, which I put up here. One. And 2. I can go back in the fridge. And we want what? Teaspoon of vanilla? Yes. Which this was the new vanilla that I bought for the no-bake cookies, but I ended up not needing it because I had just enough from last time from when I made the no-bakes. Teaspoon of that. And we want to stir this until we have a smooth mixture. Okay, that looks pretty smooth to me. So now we're going to add in the dry ingredients. We want the flour, which I've got right here, 1/2 cup of that. And 1/4 teaspoon each of salt and baking powder. Salt. Easy does it. And baking powder, which I've got right here. Take some liberties there. And this we want to get to, we want to stir this vigorously to combine. I've got flour going everywhere here. Okay. I think we've got that there. So now we want to pour that into the prepared pan. So I've got the parchment paper in the 9x9 pan here. So now we're going to pour this in. I'm going to grab a I've got a spatula down here for scraping the pan purposes, which I'm going to reach for here. I was originally going to use that for scraping for smoothing the top, but it'll work for both purposes. These are looking like they're going to be they're pouring out to be a little bit thin, but I'm hoping they'll rise when they go in the oven. But I think we've gotten as much of the batter as we can out. I think that's probably as much as I'm going to get. So now these brownies are going to go in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes. Then we're going to remove them from the oven to cool. So I'll go ahead and put them in the oven. We'll tip this over here. Putting it in the oven. Just because I know what my oven's like, I'm going to set the timer for 35 minutes because I know the temperature tends to run a little bit. I know it tends to run a little bit long on cooking times, but we'll come back to that into here in about 35 minutes. I've got the brownies cooling off shot, so now we're going to take our 3 tablespoons of butter, and we're going to melt that. I'm going back to the medium saucepan. They say small, but remembering what I've got to put in, I don't trust that pan, so I'm going to melt this over medium-low heat. Once again, we're just going to go ahead and watch that melt in real time while I get everything else ready. Let's see, I've got the cocoa powder there, powdered sugar, hopefully that'll be enough, and the milk. We're going to want to remove this from the heat. No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit, but I'm going Make sure, obviously, I've got very careful eyes on this. Grabbing a wooden spoon from the drawer behind me. Lift out the brownies. I'm looking at the brownies off shot, wondering if I want them out now or if I want to wait on lifting those out. I'm going to need to slice them at some point, though. Okay, that's definitely starting to melt. Actually, I'm going to put the parchment paper away while I'm at it. Butter's melting nicely. This cabinet up here isn't wanting to close. It's probably fine though. Oh, that's what's bumping up against it. Oh, we do have a portion of baking cocoa. Oh well. I just ended up using cocoa powder. That's fine. Shouldn't be too big of a problem. Butter is just about melted. Just keeping an eye on that. Well, I can probably start getting everything else ready. Oh, not what I had in mind at all. Powder went flying on me. Okay, looks like the butter's just about melted. So we can go ahead and start adding everything else in. So here we want another 1/3 cup of cocoa powder. I'm actually going to kill this. I'm actually going to kill the heat and pull it. Actually, I'm going to lower the heat down to like 2. I'm probably going to want it off at some point sooner rather than later. 2 tablespoons of milk. We'll stir that to combine. Actually, I need the cocoa powder back down so I can work on when I go to dust it. Stir that to combine. I may need another splash of milk in here because I'm looking for. Of course, it doesn't say what I'm looking for. But I'm sure if we're trying to get to eventually a consistency to pour, this probably isn't it. So I'm actually going to take that off the heat at this point. I'm going to go grab another splash of milk. Now I'm going to start adding in the powdered sugar, gradually, eventually wanting to get to a smooth and thick but pourable texture. Let's see if I can get a cup of the powdered sugar first. What's the date on... Oh, never mind. I got plenty of time on this. Come on. Oh, there we go. Just had to turn it just so. Okay. Stir a little bit. All right, I'm gonna have to splash more milk in as we go. Gonna thicken like, well, I might have actually wanted this back on the burner at a low consistency, or at a low heat. Hopefully it'll thicken as I add more sugar to it, but my instincts are telling me I probably wanted this on the heat for a little bit. And probably the rest of the sugar at this point. Admittedly, I've always had a problem with gravy, so I won't be surprised if I end up botching this glaze as well. That is way, I can tell you right now, that is way too runny for what we want. So I'm actually going to dump in a bit more sugar. I've got to be careful though, because I have a funny feeling I'm going to end up going too far with this. Pour in a little more sugar. Admittedly, I'm usually more of a by-the-numbers chef than this. This is kind of... I start by the numbers, but then it starts turning into by feel to try to fix a mistake. It still feels probably a little bit more runny than I want it to be, but I think we're going to go with this. So, I'm going to start getting this all out of shot. Also putting stuff away. And then we'll bring the brownies back in shot. The brownies came out in a weird shape, and I think a lot of that is because of how the parchment paper was adhering to the cooking spray I put down. It was not holding very well, but we're going to go ahead and cut these into squares. They're cutting decently well. Okay, I think we may have done something right here. We'll trim those, trim that. Okay. Alright, now that we've cut those, we're going to spoon the glaze over the tops. It's probably going to run over the sides, but I don't think there's any help for that. Well, might have been a little paranoid, but these probably aren't work treats, unfortunately. I might have wanted to keep this in the pan, but too late for that now, I think. Alright, we'll drop that back in. Now we'll dust these with the... Oh boy, that's gonna start flying all over the place. Now we're going to dust this with more cocoa powder. Whoa. This is definitely going to be a sit down and eat it with a fork treat. A little bit of ground cinnamon. I know that's a pretty horrid job of dusting, but work with me on that. I'm going to get one of these plated up, and then I'll see you guys back at my desk for the taste test. In all honesty, when this recipe came out, it's looking a lot more like you would think of a cake than you'd think of a traditional brownie where you're able to eat a brownie on the go. This you're going to have to sit down and eat most likely, especially with the glaze, but let's give it a taste and see what I think. It's actually pretty good, like a typical brownie. I'm not sure about the consistency. I was chewing on it though. I don't know if it was just giving it more time in the oven than it probably called for, but it seemed to maybe a touch crumbly. That could be the nature of the beast of brownies because I haven't had brownies in quite a while. But I was also noticing I've got a little bit of sensitivity in my teeth, that, especially on the right side, that I was noticing a little bit. If you were seeing me wince in pain a little bit, that's what it was at. I do need to get that dealt with at some point, but it's not going to be now. But that will wrap up another episode of Mystical Munchies. Next week we'll be in a new cookbook, but I'll talk more about that tomorrow during the end of October recap. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.